We're here on a nice Wednesday night. Weird weather, huh? Going from hot to cold. It's been very interesting to be in New England right now, but we have a lot to be thankful for, namely heating and air conditioning that we can switch back and forth as needed. All right. Great to see you all live. Appreciate everyone who stuck around for Wednesday night almost live last week. I was in a meeting, but we still wanted to get through the end of Romans 9. So we did that. Moving on to Romans 10 tonight. Very exciting. We are done our 4-week end of the world discussion in First Thessalonians on Sundays. So we're going into a couple of weeks of talking about living in community. So that is exciting as well. All right. Let's do this. Let's see who's here. No one yet. No comments. Actually, I saw Helen earlier, but I had to restart my computer, so she's now probably back. But let's see what we have. Oh, so we were going through some pictures last week, and I thought I would finish up the list today. So let's do that. Reverend Brian Spicer. AJ's here. Hello. Hello. Christine is here. Nice. Jonathan Thatcher is here. We have all kinds of friends here tonight. So very exciting. All right. Let's do this. Helen is back. Okay. So we're looking at some spelling mistakes that aren't fantastic. And we'll continue. Here we go. I believe what they were going for was miscellaneous forms, and this was not correct. This is weird. Everything froze up. Give me 1 second. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. Few technical difficulties. Every once in a while, the interwebs do not work. We're looking at miscellaneous things. Here's favorite vegetable. That is corns. Corns. All right. Assort gumball. I do love a good gumball, but that is not the correct spelling. Nice place to eat. Burge. Burge. How about a nice breakfast staple? Oat meat. Oat meat. No, thank you. Oat meat. And another one, cheam creams. I'm guessing supposed to say cream cheese, but I don't know. Ooh, look at that. I had to look at this one a little bit, but I believe that's supposed to say cereal. 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 I guess if you say it really fast, nobody cares. And if you like Honey Nut Cheerios or Corn Pops, then you don't even care. Here's another one. This item is reduced due to misspelling of the word bird. Brid. If you want a Brid basket, then there you go. Run to this place immediately. Dumbles. I think supposed to say dumbbells. We think we've seen this before. A bango. Spinch. Yeah. Missing letters. No smorking. Yes. Let's make sure. One rule. No smorking. Skin milk. No, thank you. No, thank you. We saw some of these last week. Sprinkles. This is Robo Sprinkles. Just why would you put the label on there? I don't understand. This is a Lober. I don't know if the garments changed the lobster, the spelling, but the Lober. Help us score the gift of life. Donate bloob. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to say blood. Oh, Mom. It's like half off. Everything's half off. Same thing. Womp. Here we go. Todd's on duty. All toys are located. Please remove if take. Thanks, Bob. Todd, help that customer. Okay. That is Todd. All right. So, yeah, I mean, the moral of the story is be careful, A, what you post in public, either on social media or via texting or on a store display, because it will get photographed and put out there on the interwebs and then read on a Wednesday night. So all kinds of fun. All right. So now we're going to go into Romans 10. Very exciting. So close to being done with Romans. Probably another 4 months, maybe longer. Been taking our time going through Romans on Wednesday nights. So we have all winter, right? Winter's coming, especially for those of us in New England. Not going to be a whole lot to do about stay inside, get warm. So we're going to go through Romans. So we're in Romans 10. I'm glad you all made it back after chapter 9. I guess you could say you were predestined to come back. A little predestination joke. Romans 10 is the other side of the coin of Romans 9. So for those of you who have been tracking with us, Romans 9, the focus was on God's sovereignty in our salvation. The focus of Romans 10 is our role in salvation. So in Scripture, God's sovereignty and man's responsibility are presented as a paradox, which means that something on the surface appears contradictory, but in reality, it is not. In a paradox, the only reason things seem to contradict is that our understanding and our perspective are limited. There's a ton of examples of paradoxes in the natural world. Usually they come from super smart people like Albert Einstein. He demonstrated back in the day that light sometimes appears to behave like a wave, and sometimes it behaves like a particle. Up to that point, those were mutually contradictory categories. They still aren't exactly sure how light can be both a wave and a particle. That's just because there are things about the nature of the universe we just don't get, which again leads to the fact that there was a creator that is greater than anything that we could ever imagine that made the earth and human beings. There's chaos theory in mathematics, where numbers are chosen totally at random and they still form a nearly perfect, symmetrical, and predictable graph. That's why all those magicians can do those tricks with numbers, because they work in order. Or the bumblebee paradox. I don't know if you ever heard of this, but for a while, physicists couldn't understand how the bumblebee could even fly. Based on what they knew about wingspan and velocity, it just didn't add up. But later, a Cambridge zoologist demonstrated that there were some imperceptible things happening in the stroke of their wings that enabled them to overcome the odds and fly. Bumblebees never seemed too bothered by the objections. They just flew. Now, the bumblebee doesn't hold the answer to the mysteries of God's sovereignty, nor does chaos theory illuminate the secrets of God's electing providence. But I think the thing to understand is if we have some apparent contradictions in nature that can be resolved with expanded knowledge, how much more should we expect that with supernatural contradictions? So Paul brings up God's sovereignty in our salvation, not to confuse us or even to invite us to reflect on the mysteries of God, but to give us assurance of our salvation. He certainly doesn't bring up the sovereignty of God to make us worry about whether or not we're elect or chosen. The Bible never, not one time, points to God as the reason somebody rejects him. A couple of verses that you won't see. 2 Peter 3:9. The Lord is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. And then when Jesus was praying over Jerusalem in Matthew chapter 23, he said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent to you, how often have I longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." Not I was not willing, but you were not willing. And then even in chapter 9 that we just looked at, when Paul explains why Israel missed the gospel, God's chosen people, he didn't say, well, God just didn't choose them. No, he pointed to something about them that made them miss the gospel, namely the fact that they could never admit that they couldn't be good enough to earn God's favor. So it wasn't something about God, something about us. The point is, God's given all of us a sincere invitation for us to receive him. If you reject him, that's on you. On the other hand, if you choose God, then you know God was in it. Here's how we said it. If any of us are saved, all the praise goes to Jesus Christ. If we're lost, all the blame goes to us. When we try to put all that together in your mind, it creates a tension that can feel like your head's going to explode. So let me give you a couple of helpful things. First of all, this was John Calvin's favorite verse. It's Deuteronomy 29:29. It says, the secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and to our children forever, that we may follow all the words of this law. It's like, okay, all you wannabe theologians, there are secret things, and then there are revealed things. So it's arrogant and presumptuous for us to sit around speculating about secret things when simple obedience to the revealed things is what God asks us. So think about Deuteronomy 29:29, the verse we just read, tells me there are things about the ways of God that I will never figure out, at least not in this life, maybe ever. But that's okay, because God's revealed enough for me to grasp his will and obey it. And so what Paul says about God's sovereignty in Romans 9, he says that I might be confident in what God is doing in my life, knowing that what God started in us, he'll finish. That's its only purpose. That's why he talks about God's sovereignty. Oh, my friend Gary Hansen is here. I am enraptured by the amazing things of God that are all around us. I was always careful not to tell the bumblebee he could not fly. Excellent. This is a funny guy. We love Gary Hansen and Convoy of Hope. All right, some more helpful stuff about the paradox between God's sovereignty and man's choice. Martin Luther, in his commentary on Romans, pointed out that Paul discusses these things in Romans 9, talking about God's sovereignty, not Romans 1. And that's because they're not the foundation of theology. Some Calvinists would have you believe that, something you must master before you can really live the Christian life. You have to really wrap your head around God's sovereignty and man's free will. No, they're the explanation for why the promises in Romans 8 work like they do. There's no condemnation in Christ Jesus. All things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purposes. For whom he foreknew, he also predestined, be made in the image of Jesus. Romans 9 is like a footnote for chapter 8. Martin Luther says it's a lifting of the divine hood to show you how you can be sure God will keep his promises. It's like the Wizard of Oz getting a peek behind the curtain to see who God is. And you can be sure that he will keep his promises. Romans 9 tells us when everything in your life feels like it's falling apart, hang on, because the God who started a good work in you will complete it. Martin Luther would tell people when they wrote to him, he'd say, I'm afraid I'm not elect. My faith feels so weak, and I struggle with sin so much. When people would write him that, he would say, the doctrine of predestination only ever appears in the Bible to bring comfort, never fear. If you want to be saved, you can be saved. It's in your power to choose Jesus right now. So if you have been saved, you can be sure that God was in it, and you can be sure that what he'll start, he'll finish. Okay, now, chapter 10. Like I said, in chapter 10, Paul shifts the focus back to our responsibility in the salvation process. So the first half explains how we believe. The last half, which we'll get to in a couple of weeks, explains our role in helping others to believe. So this is a big deal. I'm just going to shift the view here. There we go. Now you're not going to be able to see that, but trust me, it's there. We're going to look at the first four verses of Romans 10 tonight, and I'll make it bigger when we get there. But if you've ever struggled with assurance of salvation, this can help you to see the true nature of faith. If you've ever had questions like, hey, did I pray the prayer right? Or how strong did my faith need to be to save me? Or had I really felt sorry enough for my sins to get forgiveness? This chapter and reading Martin Luther's commentary on it reveal the simplicity of faith in a way that gets that confusion out of the way. So verse 1, Paul talks about, again, about his genuine heartbreak that his fellow Jews missed the gospel. Here it is. He says, brothers, and it means brothers and sisters when he says it here. My heart's desire and prayer to God for them or concerning them is for their salvation. This isn't just an academic pursuit for Paul. And notice he says he's praying for them, which begs the question, well, Paul, if it's all about God's choosing, why even pray for their salvation? What difference does your prayer make? But see, that's the point. Even Paul, after talking about God's sovereignty, so he just spent a whole chapter talking about God's sovereignty, and then he's praying for people. He recognizes the role that his prayers play in bringing Jesus to others and others to Jesus. He knows his prayers are the means by which God works in the life of others. So he doesn't stop praying for God to open their hearts to the gospel. Verse 2, he says, for I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God. So I bear them witness. It means I can testify about them that they have zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. So he's saying the Jews' problem is that they lacked zeal for God. We know, if you read anything about the Jewish nation, they were the most zealous people on earth. They would put modern day fundamentalist Muslims and Buddhists to shame. They had 613 written Old Testament laws that they strictly adhered to, but then they developed a whole set of traditional customs to help ensure that they didn't break any of the 613 laws. They called these the hedges about the law. So think of like a pit in the ground, and then you put a hedge around it that keeps you from falling into it. Just one example, they had 39 different rules about Sabbath keeping, including the literal number of steps you could take before you were considered to be working on the Sabbath. So they were always counting their steps. And Paul says the problem was that their zeal, as admirable as it was not pursued with an accurate knowledge about God, because your zeal for God is only valuable if it's attached to the right truths about God. And this flies in the face of one of our most cherished cultural sayings, that sincerity in religion is all that matters. Paul was like, if there were ever a people who were sincere, it was the Jews, but their sincerity didn't save them. The Jews' zeal in religion actually took them to a very dark place towards self-righteousness and hatred of others. And we've all seen that, right? Religiously zealous people can be the worst. They can be violent, judgmental, bigoted, hard to be around. Just look at social media. If everything we knew about Christianity was based on what I saw Christians post on Facebook, I wouldn't want to be a Christian either. Like, I feel like Jesus would reply to most of the posts with a simple hashtag like whitewash tomb. Did I really die for this? Not elect, like those type of things. I think Jesus would be embarrassed by a lot of the ways that we interact on social media and the things that we post. Zeal for God is only valuable if it's attached to the right truths about God. Otherwise, your zeal can take you to a bad place. Verse 3, Paul says, for being ignorant of the righteousness of God, he's still talking about the Jews, and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. We talked about this in chapters 2 and 3. But at the end of the day, there's only two approaches to God. Very simple. One is where I attempt to establish my own righteousness. That's religion that's spelled D-O, do. And the other, righteousness is given to you as a gift. It's spelled D-O-N-E, done. And if you're ever convinced that you can do enough to be accepted by God, you'll never submit to the message about what he has done. So don't let anyone tell you that all religions are the same. They may most or all teach you to be kind and love people and tell the truth. Religions may encourage you to do good things, but the basis for doing those good things is entirely different in Christianity than in every other religion. In every other religion, you do those things to be accepted by God. In Christianity, you do those things because you have been accepted by God. Huge difference. Your do is fueled by his done. That's what we've explained throughout this study on Romans. Religion is I obey, therefore I will be accepted. The gospel is I am accepted, therefore I will obey. C.S. Lewis said, what separates Christianity from every other religion is grace. We obey out of gratitude and love for the God who saved us, not in order to gain his favor. And then verse 4, Paul says, for Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. The end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. After you've received the righteousness of Jesus, you no longer need the law to give you righteousness. And that produces a different spirit in you and I. Tony Evans had a great illustration for this. He said in one of his messages, he doesn't understand why people, when given a choice between unsweet tea and sweet tea, choose unsweet tea and then just add sugar to it. He said, have you ever tried to add sugar and stir it into iced tea? He said, you put in what you think is enough. You take the first sip and it tastes bitter still. So you keep adding and keep stirring and you have all these little particles floating around in it, but it's nearly impossible to get it sweet enough. But then you get to the bottom of the glass and you have a full centimeter of sugar at the bottom. That's like trying to sweeten your spirit through the law, Tony Evans says. He said, many of you are trying to make it to God's heaven by stirring up your own righteousness. You're stirring as hard as you can, like got to live right today, got to do better today, got to go to church today, got to give money today. And you stir and you stir and you stir, and it's still not sweet. You've stirred your life the best you can, but stuff is still settling at the bottom and it's not blending in. He says the righteousness Jesus Christ offers is the end of your stirring. He'll make you into sweet tea. He is the end of the law to everyone who believes because he's already fulfilled the law for you and put his spirit into you. That's pretty cool, I think. After Christ credits you with his righteous record, puts his spirit inside of you, you no longer need to add it artificially or stir your calendar frantically to establish it. There's some smart guys out there and some really good speakers. So I always appreciate hearing a take or an illustration like that from somebody that has done this for a long time, like Tony Evans. Very cool. So that's the first 4 verses. We're going to attack the rest of the first half of this chapter next week. And Paul starts discussing the difference in the 2 approaches to God. He quotes Moses. And again, this is all for encouragement. Why God is trying to explain, or why Paul is trying to explain God all around is not so people will be scared or concerned. It's all about laying a foundation so that we can know how to be saved. We can be sure that we are saved. And then we can communicate that to others. The goodness of God, the grace of God, the message of the gospel. You have a good, solid foundation. If I know that I'm good, then I want to make sure that everybody around me is good too, because there is nothing like going to sleep at night knowing that you are good with the God of the universe, not because of anything that I've done or anything that I will ever do, but because of what Jesus has done. And I accept that in his righteousness for my brokenness, and raising the empty hand in faith, saying, Jesus, I believe. If you're rescuing people, rescue me. If you're healing people, heal me. If you're saving people, save me. And then we become part of his rescue mission. It's really cool. Really cool what we do. I appreciate it. Cool that we have network churches to partner up with. We have network pastors to partner up with. We have ministries that are doing stuff all over the world that we get to partner with. And I am just excited to be a part of Brookridge and our extended family and friends. And there's a lot going on, and I'm excited. So hope to see you back next week. We will continue in Romans chapter 10. Let us know if we can do anything for you. Again, we're back into 1 Thessalonians. My buddy from Pennsylvania, Mr. Rodriguez. Appreciate you, my friend. Vince has been with us since we first started going live during COVID. And I appreciate you very much, man. Yeah, that's what I got for you. Let's see. Any other comments? Oh, thank you. Speaking of, that's our tie to Mr. Rodriguez, is John Thatcher, our very own JT. And yes, we are praying for you. Remember, you work is if it work and pray as if everything's up to you. And we talk to God as if everything is up to Him. So we know there is a part that we play in salvation, but it's the sovereignty of God rules all. All right, we'll talk about this more again. Don't want your heads to explode every week too much. So this was our time. I will talk to y'all soon.